Con by Mark Henderson. In Con, the gripping sequel to Perilaus 2, Doug Carmichael, crime novelist and former hospital doctor, has spent almost 16 years of a life sentence in prison for the murder of his partner Linda. He is now eligible for parole. There was never any material or forensic evidence against Doug, but he confessed to the murder from the start and would not be persuaded to change his plea. He undergoes a series of interviews with a forensic psychologist, Fiona MacDonald, who is acting on behalf of the parole board. Fiona demands written accounts of Doug's prison experience and of the dreams he recorded when he was a young man. On the face of it, her aim is to achieve a complete understanding of Doug's character so she can advise the parole board about his suitability for release on licence, but acknowledges her intention to write academic papers about him. Doug suspects other motives and tries to find out more via friends outside the prison. Through the interactions between Doug and Fiona, we are drawn into Doug's prison life and the grim, funny, sad, infuriating, smart, stupid and scary men with whom he shares his days. Aware that he's being psychologically dissected, Doug starts to engage in verbal duels with Fiona. These duels are weighted in Fiona's favour, but he succeeds in hiding some of himself from her analytical scrutiny, and occasionally disconcerts her. This is no stereotypical relationship between criminal and forensic psychologist. Far from seeking to minimise his guilt, Doug never wavers from that original confession. He killed Linda. This leaves Fiona's conventional role redundant. Doug doesn't need to be pushed to confront his guilt. Oddly, it is Fiona who starts to explore the evidential anomalies of the case.
Yes, okay, series books. Before I answer this particular question, let me just go back a bit, if I may. I'd like to just explore this author. We're talking about Mark Henderson, who has lately released a book called Con, which is a sequel to the book he released, I believe, about a year ago, called Perilaus 2. Well, my first encounter with Mark Henderson was via Cruel and Unusual Punishments. Yeah, there's a sentence I perhaps should have thought out first. I'm talking, of course, about his Punishments with a double N in the middle, his book of puns and verse, and he is the master of the anarchic pun. And I would love to see him perform sometime. He does a stand-up. I've not yet had the pleasure. Hope to soon. Now, when Mark Henderson first wrote a novel, or the first one that I knew about was called National Cake Day in Ruritania, having only read his puns and his verse and so on, I had no idea what to expect, but had a read, and it was excellent. It was what can I say? I mean, yeah, it was a thriller, it was an adventure, it was a parody, it was everything, but it had a gripping story that went through it. I kind of started off the book thinking, aha, parody, what are we going to be parodying? And I got to the end of it and I thought, well, what did we not parody in this? It was brilliant. It was laugh out loud funny in places. It was also dramatic. It was a gem of a book. And yeah, what can I say? If you haven't read it, I recommend it. He went on then to write a couple more books, parodies. He wrote The Cat of Doom, The Man Who Let the Cat of Doom Out of the Bag, which is another Yeah, similar style, very different book. Also with it has gripping themes that go throughout. It's the sort of book that could so easily miss the mark, and they don't. He's got it down to a T. He knows what he's doing with these things. Now, when he came out with Perilaus 2, and I heard it was a crime novel, I was quite surprised. It just seemed like it was something too normal, if you like, to come from Mark Henderson's pen. But I read it and loved it. I was expecting again that maybe it was going to go into the sort of parodies he's done before. But no, it didn't. Essentially, it was a straight crime novel, but it had a very, very interesting psychological theme running through it. And the main character, Doug Carmichael, really did have issues. And this kind of came out more and more through the book in the most amazing way. I mean, no spoilers. I'm not going to tell you the particular twist, but it was amazing. But of course, we saw the whole world, through Doug Carmichael's eyes. And this was a guy with big issues. This to him was the real world. This was how it was. And that made for a really interesting angle on it, especially with the twist he gave it. Now, what I really, really wasn't expecting was that there was going to be a sequel, because I would not have thought, where on earth could a sequel go from there? But lo and behold, Mark has come out with Con, which is the sequel. And here we have Doug Carmichael again. And Doug Carmichael is sitting in a prison cell. And he's been there for 15 years in Con. And we get gradually to see the story unwind and actually find out the real world that was there underneath Perilaus 2 that we didn't really get to see because we were seeing everything through Doug Carmichael's eyes. It's very clever the way that he unwinds it. The psychology of it is gripping. It's a kind of, there's a bit of a duel, I should say, between Doug Carmichael and a psychologist who is interviewing him on behalf of the parole board. But also, what he does is he pulls us right into the day-to-day life of life within a Scottish prison. And it is remarkably real and absolutely fascinating. This is clearly somebody who's researched. As far as I'm aware, Mark Henderson's never been locked up for anything, let alone a serious crime. But I believe he's worked in prisons and clearly got to know people who've been very frank with him and told him all sorts of stuff. It is gripping. And now I'm getting round to the original question, because it's a series, it's a follow-on book, it's a sequel. Does it matter which order you read them in? Some series doesn't matter. Some series it's absolutely vital that you read one before the other. This is the first time I've read two books like this, and I'm really struggling for an answer. Clearly I read them in sequence, because I read Perilaus 2 when it first came out, and then I've now read Con. The thing is, having read Con and actually unwound so much of the story in Perilaus 2 that I'd never even seen, what I really wanted to do then was get back to Perilaus 2, get back into that world, and see what had happened, what it was all about, what was I going to see, reading that when I'd just read Con, when I got Con in my mind. And so I did, I went back to it and I reread it through that lens, and it was amazing. I got so much more, I got more out of it. And I'm almost tempted to say, yeah, go for the second one first, because you're going to get to know this guy, you're going to get to know what's happened, you're going to get to know, as it were, the punchline. But it's going to leave you thinking, but how? What's the route that got here? Need to dig deeper and actually find out what happened. And of course, knowing all this, you can go back to Perilaus 2 and just know more of the context. It was like reading it through a different lens, if you like, because I'd kind of seen more of this world through the eyes of a different Doug Carmichael, through the eyes of other people as well. And it's absolutely fascinating. Now, if you want to read them in sequence, read them in sequence. I did. But don't say I didn't warn you. Having read Perilaus 2 and then Con, I bet you'll go straight back to Perilaus 2 and read it all again so that you can actually see it in that light. And, well, if you do, I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. It's a brilliant book. I shall make a prediction that there can't possibly be a third book in this series, because I don't know where it's going to go. I say that in the full knowledge that when I read Perilaus 2, I thought to myself, there can't be another book in this series because it's got nowhere to go. So who knows? Come back to me in a few years' time when I'm probably reading the 5th or 6th in the series and we can talk about it again. But no, Perilaus 2, I can't advise. All I can say is, if you've got a Con, read it, you're really, really going to enjoy it. Likewise, Perilaus 2, I don't think it matters. I think if you read one, you'll go straight to the other anyway. So please, yes, if you haven't read them yet, get them both. Enjoy them. They're absolutely gripping. Con by Mark P. Henderson, a review by Stuart Aiken. Con is a complex psychological thriller and a sequel to the author's novel Perilaus 2, but you don't need to have read the first novel, though reading Con will almost certainly inspire you to read its predecessor. We enter the dangerous, disturbing world of the prison here, and the author takes us to the beast without even the protective voice of understatement, but with the enabling veil of black humour. I laughed out loud at some of the antics and descriptions, even as I shrunk from some of the more unpleasant aspects, a euphemism there I'm afraid, of prison life as depicted. We are reintroduced to Doug Carmichael, the untrustworthy protagonist of Perilaus 2, as he approaches the point in his prison sentence when parole may be possible. As a man unsuited to prison life, a man of intelligence, taste and familiarity with luxury, his term of incarceration has been faced with the fortitude of the survivor. When the forensic psychologist Fiona is appointed to determine his true state of mind prior to a potential release back into the outside world, he is forced to face the realities of his own personality, while also providing her with insight into the life of the prisoner. She demands, and sometimes gets, complete honesty. But Carmichael's inner turmoil and uncertainties, stemming from childhood issues he is reluctant to face, make him play a game with her, feeding her half-truths and occasional downright lies, along with his anecdotes and essays. The relationship between these two people is at the heart of the novel. But Carmichael's development as a human being is also a major theme, as he struggles to accept what Fiona's deep questioning reveals about him. If you've ever wondered about prison life, This particular sentence is spent in Scottish jails, but I suspect the descriptions of drug use, violence, criminal minds, and the behaviour of those under sentence is much the same everywhere. This book will enlighten you. Taken as a warning to avoid prison, I'm sure it would make many people think very hard before committing any criminal act. The author has spent time teaching in prisons, so he does know what he's talking about. I found this a hard read at times, highly amusing at others, engaging throughout and very satisfying. If you're sensitive to foul language, remember this book is an honest account of prison life and tells the truth about the people and events in such an institution, using where appropriate the often colourful words used by the inmates. You have been warned. Now, having read this sequel, I'm tempted to reread Perilaus 2 and apply the insights of the prison book to the character of the protagonist as depicted in the first novel.
Okay, Jack, nice to see you and nice to talk to you. Now, FBP have suggested that you and I, as the people with medical knowledge, me long retired and you a long time to go before retirement, we share that, some knowledge and experience of medicine. And good question, to what extent has it influenced our fiction writing? Is it a question you find easy to answer?
So it has influenced it in certain ways. I suppose the primary objectives or things I'm thinking about while writing do not relate specifically to medicine. I have often wondered about writing about medical context, satire about health service or murder mysteries in the health service context. But my book, Gravity's Arrow, and the books I'm working on, the sequels to that, at the moment, they're science fiction with a fantasy vibe. I suppose science has had a lot to do with it, and I think science has fed into that a lot. During my medical degree, I did an integrated BSc in human genetics, and that had something to do with a bit of it. But medicine specifically, here and there, I've brought in certain details that came very easily to me because of my medical background, but they wouldn't be that specifically medical. I think the most kind of medical moment probably was a neuro exam that happened in one book of mine. Well, in Gravity's Arrow, near the start, there's a section where the main character has a head injury, and a doctor assesses him, and it briefly describes some elements of a neurological exam. And I guess that may not be something that most authors might be that familiar with. Right. I read through that, and it worked so well. I never asked the question about it. It was just, of course, that's exactly what you would do. So, yes, I suppose our influence can, in that respect, creep in with almost without our noticing it, without our readers noticing it. Quite possibly, yes. Interesting, yes. For me, I've used my medical knowledge in all sorts of ways. I wrote the first book that FBP published for me, well, apart from my little book of puns, was National Cake Day in Ruritania, which, as one might infer from the title, is a satire on almost everything. I haven't got politics and economics and law and philosophy and even folklore and sports and everything, including medicine. The Ruritania of my imagining has a medically based religion. It's the Church of Aesculapius, and medical practice is according to Old Greek Aesculapian practice as we understand it from the records. It's all based on herbs and dreams. So I had rather a lot of fun, and its practitioners asking people from the West, really, do your doctors know any better than us
So I just had a little go at it that way.
Hmm.
In the Enclimastat, which is my what if book, what would happen? What if crime became impossible and inconceivable? One of my characters is a doctor working in A&E. So we have some reports of the experience of an extremely crowded and busy A&E department with just the sort of patients that none of us want to deal with, done for fun, and actually using one or two of my actual experiences working in A&E long, long ago.
Are you expecting a complaint from anyone who remembers being treated by you before?
No, not the one who had the incident with the light bulb, certainly. Right, I don't need to detail that, I know. And then the central character, the protagonist narrator of Perilaus 2 and the sequel Con, which is due to come out this autumn, is like me, a retired doctor who has taken to writing novels. He is not me. I'm not a whiskey drinker and I don't smoke, quite among other things, but at least he does share my background to that extent. So yes, in certain ways, my books have been influenced by my medical background. But in no case would I consider it a major influence, just as you have said about yours.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you probably had more, clear connections with your work and medical context sort of thing. And I guess more, you've got doctors and that sort of thing. My books, I suppose the neuro exam, and then otherwise it's things like in the action scenes, there'll be references to things that many people might know anyway, but I suppose being medical, it sort of comes easily. So, someone getting shot in the brachial plexus and losing power in their arm, someone, and someone having some sort of thoracic lung injury or traumatic injury and then frothing blood and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And I guess in the horror scenes, there's a bit in one of my, I won't say where it is, but there are some characters who disfigure themselves in a fashion that wouldn't really be compatible with living with these disfigurements day to day, but they use special prostheses to mask their identities and also help them function with these disfigurements on their faces and that sort of thing. Right. And I suppose the way I've described those disfigurements does sort of rely on sort of medical jargon a bit, that kind of thing.
But it fits very smoothly. And yeah, it could have been done by somebody without a medical background, but as you say, much easier for you to do it. You don't have to look it up.
Yeah. And I suppose having operated on faces and things, I guess I've seen, it makes you more aware of what sort of disfigurements could possibly happen. And I think that therefore is sort of inspiration for what happens in the book sometimes. Yeah. All
our experiences, including our professional experiences, are going to influence our writing in some way. But it's rather interesting just to explore this point, isn't it, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've said enough now to give something for FBP for the promotion, and let's hope that this promotion in autumn is going to be a big help to all of us. And of course, here we are, I hope, helping each other. I do recommend Gravity's Arrow, a lovely book, and I've yet to review it, which I apologize, but I will do it.
Thank you. I do recommend all of your works as well.
You're very kind.
I also have to recommend it for you as well.
Okay.
Melody muses on animals behind bars. Con, by Mark P. Henderson, is a book set inside a prison. Note that it's very definitely an adult novel, and oh my, it's a belter. If you want a real feel for the inside of a prison without the bother of committing a crime, this is the book for you. Do real prisoners in real prisons keep pets? Well, An ambitious programme was set up in California in 2016. It pairs rescue dogs with prison inmates, teaching convicts to become dog trainers and saving rescue dogs from high-kill shelters. The last I read about it, it was benefiting both dogs and convicts. But on the whole, stories about prisoners and their pets don't exactly abound, but I have heard a few. When very young, I remember being entranced by the story of a convict and a rat who befriended each other. Though given that the relationship culminated in the rat bringing the convict the key to his cell, allowing him to escape, I'm inclined to think that one was fiction. The thing about Con is that it's so real, it feels as though Mark P. Henderson must have pulled all the anecdotes from life, even though the book is fiction. There's even a falcon. So of course I simply had to ask. Although I couldn't ask directly about the falcon, a peregrine falcon no less. I daren't because I didn't want to hear that he'd made that one up. I kept my question fairly open. It was this. There are well-known stories of prisoners and pets, e.g. the Birdman of Alcatraz, but did you hear of any real pet stories in your research for the book? And here's the amazing answer I got from Mark. The only pet story I've included is the peregrine falcon vignette in the chapter about Jack. I was told this by a con who claimed to have witnessed the incident. I did hear others, including one about a mouse being caught and kept as a pet by the prisoners in one section of a hall in a mainstream Scottish prison. Allegedly, they kept scraps of food for it and took it for a walk along the section on an improvised lead. The mouse seems to have forged at least temporary bonds of friendship among the prisoners concerned. How good is that? Result: the peregrine falcon turned out to be real. I needn't have worried. But now I'm wondering if they were training that mouse to steal keys.